Imagine you are standing in front of a giant, beautiful palace. The sun is shining and the flags are waving in the breeze. You are there to see the royal family, especially the children. Everyone is happy and the little Prince Louis is waving and smiling at the crowd. But then something very strange happens. Prince Louis walks up to a tall guard who is standing as still as a statue. The prince leans in and whispers something. Then he says it again, louder this time. The people nearby stop cheering. The guard's face turns very pale. Suddenly, the Secret Service workers start talking into their radios. The happy day turns into a scary mystery. What did the little prince say? Why were the grown-ups so afraid? This was not just a little boy being silly. It was the start of a huge secret coming out. It was a moment that made the palace guards and the royal family realize that something very old and very mysterious was happening inside the palace walls. If you want to know the whole story and how a little boy's words changed everything, you are in the right place. We are going to talk about secret files, hidden rooms, and a mystery that goes back hundreds of years. Make sure to stay tuned, because this story is full of twists and turns that you will not want to miss. It was supposed to be a very nice day outside. The sun was out, and it felt like a perfect spring afternoon. The royal family wanted to show everyone that they were doing well. Prince William, Princess Catherine, and their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, walked out onto the big balcony of the palace. There were thousands of people waiting to see them. The people were waving colorful flags and cheering as loud as they could. Prince George stood very still and looked very serious, like a future king should. Princess Charlotte smiled and waved with a lot of grace. And then there was little Prince Louis. He was being his usual fun self. He was hopping a little bit and waving his hands very fast. Everything looked like a perfect picture that you would see in a book. The world thought this was just another normal day for the royals. But that feeling of being safe and normal was about to go away very quickly. People who were standing very close to the family noticed something. Prince Louis was not just waving anymore. He looked very curious about something. He pulled away from the person who was supposed to watch him. He walked over to one of the palace guards. These guards wear big black hats and red coats, and they usually never move. It is very rare for a royal child to go right up to one like that. Louis leaned in close and whispered something at first. The guard had to lean down a little bit to hear what the little boy was saying. But then Louis spoke more clearly. He said something that people nearby could hear. As soon as he said it, the guard's face changed. He looked very worried and his body became very stiff. He looked over at the people who helped the royal family with a look of total shock. Another guard nearby started talking into a little microphone on his shoulder right away. The crowd was still cheering because they didn't know what was happening, but the people working for the palace knew that something was very wrong. Princess Catherine saw what was happening and moved fast. She walked over to her son and put her hand on his shoulder. She looked into his eyes, and for a second she didn't look calm anymore. She looked surprised. She spoke very softly to Louis and led him back to where he was supposed to stand. Prince William was a few feet away, but he looked over at his wife and gave her a small nod. It was like they were talking to each other without using any words. The people who work for the family were moving around very quickly now. The happy feeling in the air was gone. It felt like everyone was waiting for something bad to happen. The family decided to leave the event 5 minutes early, which almost never happens. They got into their cars very fast, and twice as many security guards followed them back to the palace. Everyone was wondering, what did Prince Louis say to that guard? And why did it make everyone so scared? The answer to that question was even more mysterious than the event itself. When they got back inside the palace, the grown-ups wanted to talk to Louis. They thought maybe he was just playing a game. But when the little prince was asked what he told the guard, he said the exact same thing again. He spoke very clearly. His mother, Catherine, froze when she heard the words. The people in the room couldn't believe their ears. The head of palace security was called in right away. A special team of people who handle big secrets was told to come to the palace. Louis didn't seem scared at all. He just looked at a lady who was trained to talk to children and repeated the words slowly. He said, "They are watching from the walls." The room became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Catherine's face turned white. She recognized that phrase, and she knew it was something very serious. What Louis said was not just a spooky sentence. It was actually a secret code that was hidden in a very old and very private royal file. This file is so secret that only a few people in the whole world even know it exists. As soon as the security team heard what Louis said, they moved into action. They didn't make a big scene, but they raised the danger level of the palace to something called Tier 3. This is just one step away from a total lockdown where no one can move. This wasn't because they thought a child was dangerous. It was because the words he used were part of a secret history. Behind the scenes, the palace started doing things they only do when there is a huge threat. They changed the paths the guards walk, they made sure no one could listen to their phone calls, and they told the smartest computer people to look at every video from the last 2 days. While the security people were busy, Prince Louis was taken to a private playroom. He had no idea that his words had caused such a big mess. In the secret command center of the palace, the workers found something very troubling. The phrase, "they are watching from the walls," had appeared once before. It was in a secret report from the year 2002. Back then, Queen Elizabeth II was still the leader of the country. Something strange had happened in the palace that was never told to the public. It was given a secret code name and kept hidden. The people who wrote the report said the phrase was a lexical anomaly, which is just a fancy way of saying it was a very strange and unexpected thing for someone to say. No one could figure out how a little boy like Louis could know a secret phrase from 20 years ago. It was impossible for him to have read that file. Princess Catherine went to her own private rooms and locked the door. She went to a special cabinet that was a gift from the late Queen Elizabeth. Hidden inside was a secret spot that most people would never find. She took out an old envelope that was a bit yellow from age. On the front, it had one word written on it: Clarion. Only Catherine and the Queen had ever talked about what was inside. Catherine read the papers inside the envelope, and then she did something very serious. She burned the papers in the fireplace so no one else could ever see them. A few minutes later, she went back to the security team. She looked very brave and calm, but her voice was low. She told them they needed to watch the hallway in the east wing of the palace very closely. She seemed to know something that the others did not. At the same time, Prince William was at a meeting for a charity across town. His special secret phone rang 3 times and then stopped. This was a secret code he had with the palace. He knew he had to leave right away. He didn't even say goodbye to everyone. He just got in his car and raced back to the palace. People at the charity event were filming him with their phones because they were confused why he left so fast. By the time he got back to the palace, the guards had already blocked off 3 of the big staircases. They were using special machines to scan the walls for anything hidden. They didn't find anything yet, but William's gut feeling told him that something very old was happening. It was like a giant machine from the past had started working again. Inside the palace, some of the older royals were talking in whispers. They were looking at each other with worried eyes because they had heard words like that before, a long time ago. Prince Louis's spooky sentence was not the first time a royal had said something like that. In fact, many years ago, the Queen Mother, who was Queen Elizabeth's mom, had written something almost exactly the same in a private letter. The palace had tried to hide that letter for a very long time. It was kept in a special place called the Royal Archives, in a room that is locked tight. Only a few people are allowed to go in there. The letter was wrapped in old paper and had a wax seal on it. For a long time, people thought it was just a poem or a silly story, but now it felt like a warning that was coming true. The people who work in the archives were very nervous. They found the original copy of the Queen Mother's letter. In the versions that were shown to the public, one sentence was covered up with black ink so no one could read it. But in the secret copy, the sentence was still there. It said, "There are those within our own walls who do not serve the crown, but watch it and wait." This sounded exactly like what Prince Louis had said to the guard. The people in the archives were so scared that they wrote a secret note and sent it directly to the Lord Chamberlain, who is one of the most important bosses in the palace. They didn't follow the normal rules because they felt like this was an emergency. They realized that the watching ones the Queen Mother wrote about might actually be real. A long time ago, when Queen Elizabeth II was getting ready for her son to become king, her helpers had read those old letters. They thought the Queen Mother was just using her imagination. One helper remembered asking what observers beyond the veil meant, but he was told it was just a fancy way of talking. They stopped asking questions, but the timing was very strange. Those letters were written just a few months before the Queen Mother died. Even though she was very old, her mind was still very sharp. Why would she write about secret watchers if they weren't real? Princess Anne had even asked about these letters years ago, and she was told they were just emotional stories. But now that Louis had said those exact words, even Princess Anne, who is a very tough person, became very quiet. People saw her face turn to stone. She remembered being told to forget those words, but now they were back. The royal family is very careful about their history. They keep everything in perfect order. But this felt like something from the past was reaching out to the present. It didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It felt like a trigger, like a button had been pushed. The people who live and work in the palace started talking about things they hadn't mentioned in decades. What used to be seen as just old stories were now being seen as a real warning. And in the middle of all this worry was Catherine. She was being very quiet and calm, but it seemed like she knew more than anyone else. People started watching her closely because she seemed to be the only one who could figure out what Louis had seen. They wondered if she had a secret key to understanding the whole mystery. As the worry grew, people remembered that Princess Catherine had access to a special room called the Blue Room in Windsor Castle. This room is not on any map that the public can see. It is hidden behind a secret wall near where the Queen used to study. Only people who are going to be the King or Queen are allowed to go in there. It is a very small room, but it is filled with very old papers and diaries. Inside its drawers, which are lined with soft velvet, Catherine had found the diaries of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria was a very famous queen who lived a long time ago. One of the stories in her diary was very similar to what was happening with Prince Louis. In her diary from 1852, Queen Victoria wrote about something she called the Whispers. She said her youngest son had said something very strange. The little boy had never been taught the words, but he talked about ones who speak through the stone. He said he saw shadows moving in the hallways at night. Victoria was a very smart lady who didn't usually believe in spooky things, but this really bothered her. She wrote that she was unsettled to the core. Her son didn't talk for days after he said those things. Catherine noticed that the words were almost exactly like what Louis had said. She also saw a line that said, "He is not unlike one that shall come, one who shall speak again what was never taught." It felt like Victoria was writing about Louis hundreds of years before he was even born. Catherine had told Prince William a little bit about what she found, but she didn't tell him everything. She didn't want him to think she was being silly or believing in ghosts. But now that her own son was saying the same things, she knew she had to take it seriously. She looked at where the little boy in Victoria's story had been when he saw the shadows. He was in a corner room in the east wing, right under the big bell. That was the exact same place where Louis was standing when he whispered to the guard. Catherine realized that this was a pattern. Different children in different centuries were saying the same spooky things in the same part of the palace. It wasn't just a story, it was real. Just when the palace was trying to keep everything quiet, a secret report was given to a newspaper. Someone who worked as a guard leaked the information, and suddenly the whole world knew. The news was like a giant explosion. Headlines everywhere said that Prince Louis had used a secret security code and that the palace was in a panic. The public was very curious and wanted to know the truth. For the first time in a long time, the royal family didn't know what to say to the public. They stayed quiet, but behind the scenes, everyone was arguing. The newspaper had received an encrypted file that no one could trace. It was a very high-tech secret. When the newspaper editors saw the file, they weren't sure if it was real at first. But then a former palace worker told them that the words in the file were part of a secret plan called Obsidian Key. That was when the newspaper decided to print the story. The phrase, "they are watching from the walls," was now being talked about by everyone. The news story said that Louis's words were the same as codes used by the Royal Defense Team back in the late 1990s. This was very bad for the palace because it meant their secret codes weren't secret anymore. People started asking how a little boy could know a code for a secret army mission. The palace didn't say anything, but their silence made people even more curious. People wanted to know why they weren't denying the story. By the middle of the day, 2 guards were brought in for questioning. One of them quit his job right away and didn't explain why. This made people think that something really big was being hidden. Even the people in the government started asking questions. They wanted to know if the royal family was in danger. Meanwhile, Catherine kept Louis away from the cameras. He wasn't allowed to go to any more public events. The family was trying to protect themselves from the secrets that were coming out from inside their own home. Queen Camilla was very angry about the news. She thought that maybe William and Catherine were making up the story to get attention. She had a big argument with one of the palace workers over breakfast. She felt like she was being left out of the loop and that people were listening to Catherine more than her. But the public didn't care about the family fighting. They only cared about the mystery. People on the internet were debating if Prince Louis was special or if he had just overheard someone talking. Some people thought he was like a messenger from the past. Others were worried that there was a hidden danger in the palace that had been there for a long time. The mystery was now way too big to keep secret. While the newspapers were busy, Prince William was doing his own investigation. He went back to Windsor Castle and walked through the same hallways where Louis had been. He wasn't looking for ghosts, he was looking for clues. He found a room that had been locked for many years. The air was very thick and dusty. Inside, he found a secret door that was hidden behind some old paintings. The door led to a hidden staircase that wasn't on any of the palace maps. It went down into a part of the castle that was supposed to be empty. At the bottom of the stairs, There was a secret room that was used a long time ago for very private meetings between the king and his most trusted friends. The room was very cold and filled with dust. William looked behind the old throne in the room and found a hidden drawer. Inside was a small black box. It was a computer drive that held videos from the palace security cameras. The drive had a label on it that said it was from 2017. It was supposed to have been destroyed years ago after a security problem. William took the drive to a special room where he could watch the video. He only let 2 other people stay in the room with him. The video was a bit fuzzy at first, but then it cleared up. It showed the same secret room, but back in the year 2017. In the video, a child entered the room. It wasn't Louis, and it wasn't anyone William knew. The child stood very still and looked at the wall. Then the child turned around and said something, but there was no sound on the video. Even though he couldn't hear the words, William looked like he had seen a ghost. His face went white. The video ended with static. William didn't say anything. He just ordered the drive to be locked up in the most secret vault in the palace, a place where they keep the biggest secrets of the monarchy. He looked more serious than he ever had before. He realized that the mystery was not just about Louis. It was a pattern that had been happening for a long time. Something in the palace was waking up. The younger generation of royals was being pulled into a secret that they weren't supposed to know about yet. William didn't tell the public what he saw, but he made some very fast decisions. He called for a meeting with Princess Anne. When Anne tells people to meet her privately, everyone knows it is a big deal. Anne is the sister of King Charles, and she is known for being very brave and not believing in nonsense, but even she was shaken by what Louis had said. She decided it was time to tell William and Catherine the truth about something called the Obsidian Brief. The meeting was very private. No reporters, no guards, just the 3 of them. Anne showed them a file that had a stamp on it from the Cold War. She told them that Louis was not the first child to say those spooky words. She explained that Operation Obsidian Key was a secret plan that started in the 1980s. It was created because another royal child had wandered into a secret room and said the exact same thing as Louis. The palace and the Secret Intelligence Agency, MI5, made a deal. They decided to put cameras and microphones in certain rooms where strange things happened. They wanted to watch the children of the royal family to see if they said or did anything else that was unusual. Anne said she had been part of this secret plan for a long time. She had been sworn to secrecy and couldn't tell anyone, not even her own family. She explained that there was a program to monitor royal children for anomalous behavior, which means things that science can't explain. She said only 3 other children had ever been part of this, and Louis was the 4th. Anne looked Catherine in the eyes and said, "He is not sick and he is not making things up. He is saying what has been said before." She told Catherine that she had to protect Louis like he was the most important person in the world, or the whole royal family might be in trouble. For Catherine, this changed everything. She used to be worried that her son was just having a hard time, but now she realized he was part of something much bigger. He was like a signal or a warning for the family. Anne's words stayed in her mind: protect him or lose the line forever. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was a mission. The truth was finally coming out of the shadows. Because of this, a very important meeting was called. King Charles himself came to the table. Even though he likes old traditions, he couldn't ignore what was happening. He met with the family at Balmoral, a big castle in Scotland, in the middle of the night. King Charles signed a very important paper called an emergency royal order. He said they had to protect the line at all costs. This meant they would do anything to keep the royal family's future safe. Charles remembered a secret file his mother had shown him a long time ago. It was called the Windsor Appendix. It was a secret that was only passed from one king to the next. It warned about a child who would echo the first whisper. It said that there would be a time when the Watchers would return. Charles used to think it was just an old legend, but now he saw that it was coming true. He used a special power that a king hasn't used in over 60 years to make sure Louis was safe. Charles gave Catherine a new title, Interim Keeper of Blue Protocol. This was an old job from the time of Queen Victoria. It meant she was the person in charge of protecting royal children who had special insight or could see things others could not. This was a huge responsibility. They changed all of Louis's guards and even brought in people from different religions to say prayers and do special rituals in the palace hallways. They weren't just protecting him from bad people. They were trying to protect him from something mysterious that didn't have a name. Charles spent hours in the archives reading old notes from his grandmother. He was looking for any clue on how to handle this. Catherine accepted her new job with a serious look. She understood that being a mother to Louis meant she was also the guardian of a giant secret. The royal family was going back to their old ways, focusing on mysteries and traditions that they had tried to forget. They were becoming less like a modern family and more like the royals from hundreds of years ago. But even with all the new guards and secret rituals, they couldn't stop Louis from saying one more thing. It was the final twist in the story, and it happened in front of some of the most important people in the church and the palace. The whole country was still talking about Louis's first secret, but the second one was even more shocking. It happened in a very quiet and holy room in the palace. Catherine had brought Louis there to meet with the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the head of the church. They wanted to see if the little prince could find some peace, but instead of being quiet, Louis looked right at the Archbishop. He wasn't scared at all. He said, "The Queen told me I will need to lead before the sun breaks again." As soon as he said it, the room felt very cold. Everyone froze. The Archbishop was so shocked that he said a quick prayer and walked out of the room right away. The people who helped the king were terrified. They knew that the phrase Louis used was in another secret file called Appendix Clarion II. This file was kept in a vault under a famous chapel. It was a very old text that talked about a child of the echo. It said that if the protectors weren't careful, a child would have to lead the family through a very dark time. This wasn't something Louis could have learned in school. It felt like he was being given messages from Queen Elizabeth herself. Catherine started to cry and fell to her knees. She was so overwhelmed by the mystery. Prince William stepped forward and hugged her and Louis. He whispered to his son, "Not yet," because he didn't want his little boy to have to deal with such a big destiny so soon. From that day on, everything in the palace changed. They started looking at the rules for who would be the next king in a whole new way. They weren't just talking about who was the oldest. They were talking about who was meant to lead during a mysterious time. The bosses of the palace were having secret meetings by candlelight. They were trying to figure out if Louis was a prophetic child, a boy who could see the future. They wondered if he was talking to the spirits of the past, or if something even older was using him to send messages. The royal family, which is hundreds of years old, was facing a mystery that they weren't prepared for. The story of Prince Louis and the secret of the walls became one of the biggest mysteries in the history of the crown. People outside the palace gates were always looking for clues, but the real truth was hidden deep inside the stone walls. Everyone wondered, how did a little boy know all these secrets? What else can he see when he looks at the old paintings and the long hallways? The monarchy was standing on the edge of a new and mysterious future. They had to decide if they would listen to the warnings or keep trying to hide the truth. And as the sun went down over the palace, everyone knew that the watching ones were still there, and the story was far from over. This mystery has shown us that even in a world with computers and phones, there are still things that can't be explained. The royal family might look like they are just in the news, but they are also part of a very deep and ancient story. Prince Louis might just be a little boy who likes to play, or he might be the key to a secret that has been waiting for a long time to be told. Whatever the truth is, the palace will never be the same. The guards will keep their watch, the parents will keep their secrets, and the little prince will keep his eyes open. We may never know every detail, but we know that the whispers are real, and the future of the crown is more mysterious than anyone ever imagined. Thank you for listening to this amazing story. It reminds us that there is always more to a story than what we see on the news. The palace walls have many secrets, and sometimes it takes a child to help us find them. Make sure to keep following along as more secrets from the royal family come to light. You never know what might happen next in the world of the royals. As the days went by, the palace felt different. It wasn't just a place where people worked anymore, it felt like a place where history was alive. Every time Prince Louis walked down a hallway, the guards would watch him with a mix of respect and fear. They wondered if he would say anything else. Princess Catherine spent her time in the archives, looking through old boxes of letters and photos. She wanted to make sure she was ready for whatever came next. She felt a great weight on her shoulders, but she was also proud of her son. She knew he was special, even if it was a bit scary. Prince William stayed close to her, and they became a stronger team than ever before. They knew they had to be brave for their children and for their country. The public didn't know everything, but they could tell that something was going on. They saw more guards at the gates and fewer pictures of Prince Louis. People started telling their own stories about the watching ones. Some people thought it was a ghost story, while others thought it was about secret spies. But the royal family stayed quiet, keeping their secrets safe behind the heavy palace doors. They knew that some truths are too big to share with everyone at once. They had to be careful with the power of the words that Louis had spoken. Words can be like a key that opens a door you can't close again. In the end, the story of Prince Louis is a story about family and the things we pass down from one generation to the next. Sometimes we pass down jewelry or houses, and sometimes we pass down secrets and mysteries. The royal family has a lot of history, and they are still figuring out what it all means. Prince Louis might be the one who helps them understand it. He is a little boy with a big destiny, and the whole world is waiting to see what he will do. Whether he is a messenger or just a very curious child, he has made everyone stop and think about the past and the future. The mystery of the watching ones might never be fully solved, and that is okay. Some of the best stories are the ones that keep us wondering. It reminds us that there is still magic and mystery in the world, even in a big city like London. So the next time you see a picture of the royal family, look closely at the background. Look at the old stone walls and the quiet hallways. You might just wonder if someone or something is watching back. And remember the little prince who wasn't afraid to speak the truth, even when it scared the grown-ups. His words will echo in the palace for a very, very long time. The palace officials eventually went back to their normal jobs, but they never forgot the day Louis talked to the guard. It became a story they whispered to new workers, a warning to always be alert. The secret files like Clarion and Obsidian Key stayed locked in their vaults, waiting for the next time they might be needed. King Charles continued to lead with his new decree in place, making sure his family was protected. And Catherine, the keeper of Blue Protocol, kept her eyes on her son, ready to listen whenever he had something to say. The line was safe for now, but the watchers were still there, silent and waiting. As the moon rises over Windsor Castle, the lights in the windows start to go out one by one. The palace becomes quiet, and the only sound is the wind in the trees. But if you listen very carefully, you might hear the faint sound of footsteps in a hallway that is supposed to be empty. You might see a shadow move where it shouldn't be. The history of the crown is not just in books. It is in the very air of the palace. And as long as there is a royal family, there will be secrets. Prince Louis has opened a door to a world we are only beginning to understand, and we will be there to see where it leads. Thank you for joining us on this long and mysterious journey through the secrets of the palace. It is a story that shows us that even the most famous people in the world have mysteries of their own. We hope you enjoyed learning about Prince Louis, the secret codes, and the hidden rooms of the royal family. There is always more to discover, and we will be here to tell you the next time a secret leaks out from behind the palace walls. Keep your eyes open and your ears ready for the next whisper from the halls of history. Until then, stay curious and remember that some of the greatest secrets are hidden in plain sight. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with adventure and mystery.